Morning, everybody. Welcome to the Paen session. For a second there, we were frozen, and that's why we're starting a minute or two late. But the computer is responding now, everything's responding. And this is number 7 in a 9-week series on red teas. We've been to Yunnan. We started out the first 3 in Yunnan. We did the second 3 in Anhui, so in the Chiman area. Now we're going to focus in Fujian Province. And this is going to be fun because people who don't really know red tea tend to think, you've been to Anhui? Okay, Chiman, yeah, that's red tea. But remember, last week we talked about when that started. That really started in the 1800s, didn't it? Around 1875. Exactly around 1875, as a matter of fact. So what was happening with red tea pre-1875? Did it just spring out of the ground in Anhui in 1875? And the answer would be no. Red tea's been in existence since sometime in the 1500s. You notice every time we do these sessions, by the way, that the dates change a little bit for red tea. And they change because I keep up with research, and new research has come forth, which really seems to set the start of red teas in the 1500s. Probably the late 1500s, but the 1500s nonetheless. The Dutch were already getting some form of red tea, it looks like, in around 1610. And by the way, just in case you're wondering, because in previous sessions, when I've lost control of myself and done a lot of history, I think I made a promise, we're not going to do any more history. Well, this session is going to prove that promise a big lie, because we are going to do history this session, and we have to, because here is the birthplace, the location of where red tea arose. And you notice, for those of you who are up early this morning, up early being defined as within the last 45 minutes, you got another map from me, and it's Fujian_province map. And that map shows all the important big places in Fujian Province. So if you pull that map up and take a look at the top left, and you'll see Wuyi Mountains, W-U-Y-I, and then mountains. And then you'll see from there a river in blue, it's blue, that comes from the mountains, and it's going south. That river is important because it passes through a little village called Xingcun. Xingcun is not pointed out on the map, so don't worry about it. It's actually at the foot of the Wuyi Mountains. Why is Xingcun important? Because tea was coming from the Wuyi Mountains and going through Xingcun. Specifically, red tea was going through Xingcun. And from there, it wandered all the way to the coast, because you notice that that river flows all the way down to Fuzhou, which is on the right side. It's the capital, provincial capital of Fujian Province, Fuzhou. So tea was coming from the Wuyi Mountains and getting out. The Dutch were picking up some of it. In fact, in the beginning, they were picking up all of it. They were taking it to Indonesia and taking it to the continent being the European continent. And that's how tea via the Dutch was arriving in Europe. So I ask you the following. Was it only red tea that was arriving in Europe? And the answer was no. In fact, pre-red tea, it was all green tea. And who was bringing that green tea? Well, you had British bringing the green tea. And so in Britain and other parts of Europe, they're drinking green tea. And they're saying, yeah, the moms are applauding. Great. We have something for breakfast for the kids that isn't alcohol. And you boil this thing, so now everybody's mostly healthy. Healthy is a relative term. Healthier than before when you weren't boiling stuff. Stuff here being water. So how did red tea become popular in Europe? Here's where the history goes. And now I might have to give you dates. So the dates are all approximate. Let's pick 1662. That feels like a good date to me. That's the year a Portuguese princess called Catherine married some dude. This is not very respectful. Let me rephrase that. Married the king in England, King Charles II. Now, we're talking about tea, and all of a sudden I'm talking about royal marriages. This doesn't compute until you think about the dowry that Catherine brought with her to Britain. What did she bring to Britain from Portugal? And this was via the Dutch. She brought red tea. And this is what she served. You know why? She didn't like alcohol. She didn't like wine. Bring me the tea. And so it became very popular among the royals in England, the royal nobility class in England. Hey, tea. This is civilized. Let's have tea. And this is where the spread of red tea really started. What happened after that was, the people were watching the royals. They're drinking red tea. We're drinking this green stuff. Why aren't we drinking red tea? We're as good as those royals. And so the desire, the demand for red tea grew from there. So let's flash back to China, and let's flash back to the Wuyi Mountains. And by the way, Paen, P-A-E-A-N, today, even though it's misspelled on the packages you got, that's how it should have been spelled, is really part of that precursor of red tea that ended up going to Britain via Portugal, via the Dutch. This became so popular in Britain that the British fought 2 wars, big skirmishes, let's call it that, with the Dutch, to knock them out of the tea trade business. So by the last one, it should have been around 1669. That was the second one. They knocked the Dutch out of the tea business. And the British started taking responsibility to bring tea from China to Britain. Now, how come it took so long to get a bunch of red tea into Britain? Well, let's think about what happened historically in the 1500s that allowed red tea to actually be brought to England. And that is the shipbuilding skill increased. So ships were faster, they were more tightly sealed, the sealing process in general was better, so they were able to bring green and red teas to England and have them last. By the end of the the 1700s, the British were importing about 16.16 million pounds of tea from Asia into Britain. Was it all staying in Britain? I don't think so. I think a lot of it, some of it was certainly going on onwards into other parts of Europe. But that's a lot of tea that was going through the ports in Britain, which shows you that it became very popular. Was this the height of red tea popularity? Not even anywhere near. By the 1870s, they were bringing in 57, 58 million pounds of tea from Asia. Was this all red tea? Not all of it, but the bulk of it was red tea. Where in the early years, and let's define early years from the 1600s all the way up through the 1700s, where was the bulk of it coming from? It was coming from the Wuyi Mountains. So how was this stuff labeled? It was labeled Bohea, B-O-H-E-A, which is a local dialectical translation of the Mandarin Wuyi. So it's in Fujian dialect, spelled Bohea. Then you had Congo, C-O-N-G-O-U. So those were the labels on the boxes. What did this stuff mean? Bohea, Congo. Why did they label them two different things? The reason we label anything two different things because they are two different things. So Congo in Mandarin would be gongfu, so craft tea. But more than craft tea, there's an extension of that because I've already told you Congo and gongfu are together. But what I haven't told you is that gongfu represented small leafed. And small leaf tea was really this craft tea versus the Bohea. Some of it was craft, some of it wasn't so crafted. Congo uniformly was crafted. Small leaf, Shaojun meaning small hybrid, small type. Bohea meaning Wuyi original tea, which was arbor tea. So now we need more explanations because this is going to be confusing until I clear it up. So as soon as you hear the word arbor, you're thinking, oh, they were growing tea trees in the Wuyi Mountains. So it's called arbor tea, but they weren't allowing it to grow into, by and large, tree form. Although in some areas in the Wuyi Mountain, it really did get to tree form, but not large tree, not huge tree, but it was large leafed. So these trees during that time, maybe 8, 9, at most 10 feet tall. So we're not talking the gargantuan trees of Yunnan. So let's not get confused when I use the word arbor. This is arbor with a small a. It is large leaf. And large leaf clearly can trace its ancestry to Yunnan. So tea moved from Yunnan up towards the north. But there is this theory, and I call it a theory because there's not enough evidence for me to stand here and say, oh, this is not a theory. This is what happened. No, there's the theory that small-leafed bush originated somewhere else in China and migrated north. And that somewhere else, by the way, is Sichuan. Don't know whether this is true or not, or whether somehow this became a natural outgrowth of a cultivar from Yunnan. Do not know. So you have two theories with that. But we do know that the arbor and that the movement of tea was from Yunnan up north. So the Tsungu, Gungfu, small leaved. Let's talk about that for a minute. Small leaved, bush-like. And at that time, was most of it cultivated in the nice rows, that you can sit and watch for miles and miles, not see the end of the fields, like today's plantations? The answer would be no. This is wild tea. It certainly originated as wild tea. And it comes from Tungmu area. Now, you got 9 pictures yesterday from Tungmu area. And the pictures are symbolic of various things. So you see an old woman with tea buds in her apron walking, and she's going to turn that in for X amount of money. The tea up there is valuable. It's hand-picked, handcrafted, lots of money. You go in, you think, well, Jesus Christ, that's barely enough tea to do this thing or that thing. But not at today's values, and not the end result that's made. The end result, some of those teas are thousands of dollars a pound. So what Paen is not the arbor tree, it's the tsungo, gungfu, bush, wild. So you get all of those things together. By the way, I haven't finished talking about those 9 pictures, because in those 9 pictures, you see a land guard, and you see people with, yellow uniforms, police caps. They're standing around, looking around. They're looking for several things. They're looking for tea thieves. That's a bad word, tea thieves. It's even a bad word in modern context. Yeah, somebody stole my peon. That's a tea thief. That's very bad. They're looking for that. So people who would actually steal the plants. That's the first thing. Second thing, do they allow just any Tom, Dick, or Harry to enter that area? The answer is no. If you don't have somebody who can speak for you, in other words, yeah, I know this person and they're a good person. If you don't have somebody from interior who lives there, this is Tungmu Guan in the Wui Mountains, say, yes, I will come down and sign the paper and accompany them and make sure that they behave, you don't get in. See, we were on the outside taking those pictures, looking forlornly on the inside, until the farmer who is our connection showed up and said, oh yeah, we know these people. They aren't the LCS variety. They're bringing the tea word back to the West. And that's how we were able to enter. This place is wild. You kind of get that sense as you look at the pictures that I included. There's stuff. That's not true. There are plants growing all over the place, in some places interspersed with the tea plants. Wild animals. Dangerous snakes. Monkeys all over the place. All the things that tell you this has not left its original form. well, not very much left its original form. This is time immemorial, for the most part, how those places look. Of course, they built a few places to live. They built a processing building there. That big old long building in one of the pictures is a processing building, and that's where they do smoky pine by and large. But for the most part, when you drive up this place, it's mostly in its original form. And it goes all the way to the border with Jiangsu province. And from the border down to Xingcun, Xingcun, you don't see that anywhere on the map, but that's the place that I said there's that river where they take the tea to. There's 1,000 feet of elevation change. At the top at the border, it's 7,000 feet above sea level. So you get some sense that this is high mountain tea. This is really high mountain tea. The Paen, let's talk about Paen for a minute. This tea is what they would call xiaozhong, small varietal. We love xiaozhong. Hard to come by. Not only is it hard to come by, once you get it, if the farmer, and by and large, most of these farmers are really, really good at processing because they've been processing time immemorial, and it's family, it's lineage. You don't have new people moving in up there, buying a farm and farming. You can't even get those people past that gate. Traditional. In the heart of the Wuyi Mountains. Beautiful, beautiful area. Misted 70 to 80% of the year. It even snows. Doesn't usually stay on the ground, but it snows in this area. All the pine that they originally were using here to make smoky pine came from within this area. Horsetail pine. None does anymore. The Chinese government, local government has said, no, you can't decimate the original species of tree. Not permitted. Instead, you can hire in horsetail pine from other areas that aren't environmentally challenged, ecologically fragile. So they bring in now the horsetail pine. This story gets more complicated. You remember in the past, in the early days, I used to talk about apocryphal stories, stories about how soldiers came down. I mean, these things are probably true. But there's also another real truth about how tea is processed up here, and probably has been processed this way from the start. Even though you have these apocryphal stories to talk about, yeah, well, soldiers invaded, they lay on the grass, they set fires, and that's how smoky pine came into existence. And don't be confused, by the way. Let's get rid of the confusion right now, because I'm referring to smoky pine, and that's kind of a place setter. That's not what we're having today. We're having a xiaozhong that is not smoky pine, a small varietal that is not smoky pine. But I'm using that as a place setter because you'll see so many shops, at least in China, you don't see it here. Occasionally you see it, who say, we have small varietal. And when they use xiaozhong, it means specifically from this area, this small cultivar. And Paen represents that. Lopsang xiaozhong. Oh, I mixed the two languages. Let me do that again. Lopsang suchang. Lapsang, This is what you see in the market, representing, for the most part, smoky pine. But that's not the real translation of Lapsang Sichuan. Really, in Mandarin, Gaoshan Xiaozhong. Well, what the heck does that mean? That sounds like smoky pine to me. Well, it doesn't to me. When I translate high mountain small varietal, that's what it sounds like to me. These are the teas. These are the reasons you come to Sophie's, because we get these things in 2, 3, and 4 pound lots now, because there just isn't that much made. It's small varietal. It's from this one region only. It's lineage tea, handled by the same families year in and year out. They know what they're doing. And this is the background of that. And that's what was going to Europe under the title Tsungo. When it was labeled that way, it was the small varietal that was going there. And the British and the continental, European continent people loved this stuff. And the royals, more than anything, loved that stuff. So this is what we're talking about. And historically, this is what this represents. So Tsungo, really, this area in Tungmuguan. So somebody's going to ask me a question, so I'll shortcut it. Somebody's going to say, okay, so this means that craft tea isn't growing anywhere else in the world in China outside of Tungmuguan. The answer to that would be no also. You do have some wild tea growing in the heart of the Wuyi Mountains, also processed as the gungfu, small-leafed. Things got so confused that in the 1700s, a botanist in China and in Europe said, oh, these are two separate plants, small-leafed and the arbor. You and I know that's false. All tea. But one is a cultivar and one is part of the mainstream of the arbor movement, of the tea tree movement from Yunnan into the Wuyi Mountains. Everything was done as green tea pre-1500. And then sometime from the 1500s on, in Tungmuguan, a lot of it was done as red tea. And as that became more and more popular, other parts of the Wuyi Mountain using arbor tea then started to also produce red tea. And did these guys in other parts, were they just lazy, and instead of all the craft steps that they used in Tungmuguan, did they just say, hey, we can make money, we don't have to pay much attention, we'll just do this quick and dirty? Nope. These guys are all related. They all spoke the same dialect. They were all paying attention. Oh, he's doing it this way over there. I guess I better do it this way over here. So the craft spread across deep into the Wuyi Mountains. Now, what happened simultaneously? Simultaneously, there was the development of the cliff tea process. Simultaneously. And so you had two different traditions arise at the same time. And both great attention to detail. If you think that Shiman pays attention to detail, which you should think this, and that Yunnan is almost a backwash in terms of all these fine details. The backwash is, or backwater, not backwash, backwater is correct. But the Shiman, while they borrowed from Fujian, they didn't bring all the details that Fujian brings to the red tea world. You will have people in various tea shops, especially small craft tea shops, tell you, oh yeah, I have Tanyang red tea. Oh, I have Beiling red tea. So I ask you this, because the name is different and it has a beautiful sound to it, does your heart automatically melt and you think, well, you know, Sophie's does have Xiaozhu, but there's Beiling over here. It better not melt, because we go after the most unusual, whether it's Beiling, whether it's Xiaozhong, whether it's Tanya. These things are all interesting because they're all a little different. But remember, different doesn't automatically mean better. Different means you should try, so on your scope of understanding, you can enhance your understanding. You should definitely try. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about quality, it's here. It is right here. And this is, we refine, we tasted these red teas from other places. And they're all over China. Small pockets of producers doing red tea. And we've traveled far and wide, tasted very interesting ones. But if they're not on these boards, there's a reason they're not on these boards. And the reason that we continue to go back to certain places is because the quality of the tea belongs on this board. It belongs to you. That's why we go to these places for you, so you don't have to do all that. All right, let's see if I'm over to, oh, no wonder the boss is looking over here with, you know, there's that question in her eyes. I hate seeing this question. And the question is, when in the world are you going to finish? Because the audience is waiting to taste this wonderful tea. I'm glad I caught the full import of that question just now. So now you're going to see a chance to see Bijou demonstrate this wonderful tea. And then afterwards, for you all to together make this wonderful tea. And then for all of us to share your wisdom about the quality and about the attributes. Take out your notes, because you're in for a different ride today. And if you've been with us on this red tea ride so far, think about what you've had, because it's going to be different today. And so, without further ado, I am so happy to bring forth the tea master Bijou.
Good morning. 早上好. We do red tea. So called
Paen.
Paen, yeah. So this is the, oh, taught you know, the inside they do, you know, the, yeah.
So you see a setup here. The cup setup is all you have to, cup and this are what you have to worry about. I'll explain this in a minute, but the 2 cups and a strainer. This we actually purchased when we were in the midst of the Mooi Mountains, and we love this little set. And we actually, picked this up in near the Scarlet Robe area, and it's made specially for this area. So we just wanted to show this to you.
Mhm. This is nice of her.
Hmm?
That's a-
So we have the whole thing set up here. We have a strainer. We have a holding bowl. But that's not what you should have. You should have the 2 cups. We use a third so we can cool down the water faster, and a strainer. You use any temperature of water between 175 and 212 to get everything heated. Step 1. And welcome those of you who are new this morning. We have some new people on this morning. So then our machinery is preheated when we draw this water that we're about to use at 175. But we aerate it, we dissipate the steam, and we try and get it down close to 170. You notice there's a rhythm that develops here. Every one of us has a different rhythm, and that's based on personality. But we have a rhythm, and to find the rhythm is critical, and then to follow the rhythm and follow the details. So as you're heating the cups, dissipating the steam, you develop a rhythm. Tea Master has Tea Master rhythm. You have your rhythm. And just so long as it's consistent and you pay attention to details, it doesn't matter whether your speed is faster or slower. What matters is being present while you are doing this. And that's what rhythm is all about. The tea master is getting the leaves, putting them in the heated cup, setting the timer for 3 minutes, I believe. So Sampa has
Something.
Sampa. 3 minutes, yep. Shaking the cup. And really what we're trying to do is get the temperature around 172. If it's slightly warmer, better to be slightly cooler, that works. Pours it back into the kettle so she can control the pour because the kettle has a spout. And heats the recipient cup. That would be the tea water recipient cup. You see, you have some of the leaves on the bottom, some on the top. So when we go to this location is about an hour from that gate. And you go straight up a hill and you see many things along the way, including an area where there are monkeys, a lot of monkeys congregated. And then there's, of course, a big sign which says, "Only idiots feed monkeys." It doesn't quite say it like that. It says, yeah, exactly. It says, "Please don't feed the monkeys." And then you get out of your car and you see everybody who's there feeding the monkeys. So I asked a local person, are there ever any accidents here? And she said to us, oh yeah, there's about 50 accidents a year from people who are illiterate and feed the monkeys, and then the monkeys get aggressive, bite you. So I at least, the tea master and I had the good sense to keep distance and not feed the monkeys, but it's interesting to see them all over the place, and they would come right up to you if you really wanted them to do that, because they were curious, and many of the people there were playing around, and that's a dangerous thing when you're playing around with monkeys. There is also, as you go up this road, a place on the right where they have a bridge over a gorge. Oh, it is just fascinating, just beautiful. This bridge is shut, and the doors are locked with many chains. Why is this? When they first opened entrance into the wild area across the gorge, many people, many tourists, local tourists came and entered the beautiful forest and never came back. That area has more poisonous snakes per square whatever than anywhere else in the world. And these snakes live everywhere, including unsuspectedly in trees. That area is no longer able to be visited. All right, timer has gone off. And I tell you these things to give you some background about all of these places being in contact with one another. You got the tea fields, you got the wild areas, and then you can go to the top of the mountain. And it's just a really ecological, interesting area. And so some of you may have a question. Let me first answer this one.
Well, an observation, Kathy shares the dry leaves have a very sweet aroma.
Okay. Kathy notes dry leaves have a sweet aroma, and that is true. The question that may arise in your mind is, do occasionally snakes and or monkeys wander into the tea fields? So while they have an area of distance between the encroaching wild area and the tea fields, yes, occasionally there are snakes out there. You got to be careful. All right. This is what it looks like. This entered the quality arena. Quality arena is we take a 172-degree sip. That means you can actually take a larger sip. You figure out where the astringency is on your tongue, because there will be astringency because there's polyphenols in this beverage. And then when you swallow, you'll think about aftertaste. And at the conclusion after that, you'll think about energetics. How does this make me feel? Do I feel a warmth? Where do I feel a warmth? Do I feel a groundiness? Where do I feel a groundiness? All of these things we explore. So let's go ahead and enter the quality arena. You're not entering, I'm entering. You'll enter in a minute. And right away, I get the astringency. You'll take notes on this because every week it'll be a little different. And by the way, for those of you who are new, don't worry if somebody says, well, it's at the back of my tongue and it's at the front of your tongue. Genomically, from a gene perspective, we're all different. So we're going to have slightly different places where this shows up. So don't worry if yours shows up somewhere else, but it will show up. Aftertaste, we're going to taste things a little differently. As we think about aroma and actual taste, we'll have different words that we use. And so typically, especially for those of you who are new to this, we use floral and fruity somewhat interchangeably because something I may call floral, you may say fruity, but we're talking about the same thing. So just don't use the word garlic. If you can avoid using the word garlic this morning in your descriptions, then almost anything else is going to work. I'm going to take a second sip. And on the second sip, aroma and taste are going to be what I focus on. I'm going to reinforce where this turns its is. Okay, I made my notes and it's your turn to brew. Tea Master will brew with you. All of you have your timer set for 3 minutes. Bag number 1 labeled Paen incorrectly, should have been Paen. We'll use that bag. That's bag number 1. And by the way, for those of you who are suffering from harsh coldness or low temperatures, this is exactly the type of tea you should be drinking. I know I'm not supposed to give away energetics, and I just did because this tea warms you up.
Jennifer shares, perhaps I'm stuck on this aroma as I've detected it in other red teas. And the warm, dry leaves of this tea smell very much of chocolate, cherries to me.
Oh, I
Hey?
love this description. The warm, dry leaves, Jennifer notes, chocolate and cherries. So the only thing I would have said differently, and that's just because I'm picky, I'd have just reversed it. I'd have said cherries and chocolate. Great catch on that. Because there's definitely a very strong fruity component to this. And that chocolate is playing around in there as well.
Peter observes there's a fine red dust left in the bag. I haven't seen many teas do that.
Ah, a fine red dust left in the bag. I love this comment, and I love the fact that Peter is so focused on details because this is how you grow in this area, by being focused on details. Why then is there fine dust in these bags? Perhaps we stored it poorly. That would be the wrong conclusion. The right conclusion is that this undergoes so much processing, you tend to have tea dust as a result of this processing, a little tea dust as a result of this processing. And so rather than try and strain that out, we just throw that in there because that adds to the flavor. This is not dust produced from lousy processing. This is dust because it's such fine processing and there's so much of it. Great catch on that, by the way. And so let's do a little bit more history because actually I intended to do a lot more than I already have, but there are a few more things to talk about that we've got to talk about. So in the 1820s, Dutch traders from Indonesia bought tea seeds from the Wui Mountains and planted in Indonesia. So that's where they started their tea growth. In India, outside of Robert Fortune, you also had official purchase of tea seeds in around 1837, and they started to try and produce tea in India. And then Sri Lanka purchased much later, around 1857. And then also started to try and produce there. Why were all these countries and why was everybody trying to grow this stuff outside China? Was the flavor not good enough? Was the production not enough? And the answer is China had a monopoly. And let's think about this monopoly for a minute, because this was a monopoly from a long time. Unlike South Asia, unlike Turkey, unlike parts of Africa, where they got access to Chinese tea early over the Silk Road, Europe was thirsty. And they were thirsty for a long time until the 1500s, when they started to get tea. And so tea came to Europe late. It blossomed quickly once they got red tea going. And the British and other colonial powers were all about economics. Give me the tea. And by the way, I want something to trade for it. In other words, you know, there was mercantile interests involved here. And so when they realized that the Chinese didn't really have an interest in European products or British products, then they thought, you know what? I'm going to steal tea plants, I'm going to purchase tea seeds, and I'm going to enforce my will militarily to grab tea. And that's what happened. And this is why. Because it wasn't gradual. Europe came to tea relatively suddenly and quickly, whereas the rest of the world, because they were doing trading over the Silk Road and the Tea Horse Road and so forth. No, it was just a different vibe going in that. By the way, your timer went off. And your cup of tea should be just about ready. And so we entered the quality arena, as you saw me do. And so the first thing you do is you take a sip, ascertain astringency, ascertain aftertaste, and energetics. And then the second sip and the continuing sips ascertains aroma and flavoring. Yes.
Jeremy says the leaf seemed especially small and tight, and a lighter brown gold tweed. In the warm, dry leaf, there's a hint of chocolate, and then in the tea water, slight honey scent. Jeremy's getting dryness in the middle and roof of the mouth and the top of the tongue.
Dryness in the middle of the tongue, roof of the mouth. And Jeremy has a nice description of this tea and talks about hints of chocolate right away. And talks about honey, honey notes, and talks about how small and tight the tea leaves are. So, in essence, she's saying, gosh, you were right. This is Tungo Gungfu, small-leafed, non-arbor tea, which in fact it is. And to catch the honey and the chocolate, that is not so dissimilar from cherries and chocolate that Jennifer mentioned earlier. Everybody is kind of starting to flow in this river. Yes.
Aggie shares, I was impatient, so I started brewing along with Babe, and the aroma of dry leaves I got was sweet dried fruit. Wet leaves were floral and with hints of plum.
Sweet dried fruit for the dry leaves for Aggie. The wet leaves floral with hints of plum for Aggie. And again, you notice we're using different words, but it's all the same sense about this tea. And it's all about this sense early and strong. This isn't something you have to think a lot about. It's right there. Yes.
Dylan says, so many trichomes.
Ah, I didn't even notice. Yes, so many trichomes in this tea. And I like that comment. For those of you who are unaware, trichomes are the hairs that fall off the tea leaves. And these hairs are full of polyphenols. And they act as a natural anti-bug, natural pesticide. It's not a pesticide, but when the bugs bite these things, it tastes bad to the bugs. Whee, let's go to some other plant.
Rob shares the steeped leaves have a mix of scents, malt, steamed lotus leaf, hints of florality, and dried fruit sweetness.
So Rob captures a number of things, some of which we've already captured, floral sweetness, but he's added some things, hints of lotus leaves, hints of, what was the first thing? Malt. So we keep pulling apart these flavors because the florality and the chocolate right away, but then as you keep going through, you start to discover all sorts of other things happening in this. Yes.
Heidi says, I'm starting to get the chocolate flavors as the tea liquor cools, along with a light honey-like sweetness. The astringency for me is on the top of my palate and a smoothness on my tongue. Overall, just juicy.
I love this description. Aggie continues to focus on understanding this tea. And she talks about exactly where the astringency is on the roof of the tongue. She talks about a smoothness on her tongue, a juiciness associated with this. So in quotes, easy to drink, because as soon as you say juicy, that's very easy to drink. And Aggie goes back and further comments on that chocolatiness, because in essence, what she says, that's not what I first started out with, but I'm getting it as I go through and carefully stay present. So all of you are getting these things, Rob, Aggie, all of you are getting them because you're staying present and analyzing. And as the tea changes temperature and as it reaches more of your taste buds, you're capturing more. You're really going the full route of understanding this tea. Yes.
Jen E shares, the scent of the brewed tea was less sweet than I was anticipating, but fun to uncover. I get dried berries. I can't pin it down exactly, but something like dried blueberries, maybe dried chocolate covered blueberries. I also get some florality as well. I think it may be fresh chrysanthemum. It's light though.
Interesting. I like this description. So Jen E talks about scent of berries, dried berries, maybe covered blueberries, covered in chocolate, maybe some other berry, some florality, and she calls out chrysanthemum. I love this call out because this is chrysanthemum is not a sweet as much as it is a very distinctive but pleasant floral. Was this aroma or taste? I think it was taste.
I think it was with me florality, blah blah blah. Christian and light though. I actually am gonna back it up. Sorry, yes, scent.
Scent. Okay. Love the fact that you're capturing all of these things. And why do we do both scent and taste? Because they're related. You understand so much about tea. And for those of you who are newcomers, it is a tea sin if you do the following. You have the tea and you blow on it, because you blow away a portion of your ability to appreciate the fullness of what arrives in this tea. Yes.
Jennifer shares, it's interesting to me that the aroma of the wet leaves maintains many similar notes as to the aroma of the dry leaves. I find that the aroma of the dry leaves versus wet often changes more substantially.
I love this comment. And again, this comment comes, and for newcomers, you see Jennifer is highlighting how important it is to stay present and to think about all the details. So the detail she just revealed is, hey, Normally, dry leaves and wet leaves have a substantial difference. Here, there's a consistency in aroma, and that's a great commentary. And at the end of the day, it all points back to their skill in processing this. You can't just get up one morning and say, well, I'm going to grow small leaf bushes. I'm going to go down to the to Ace Hardware plant section, plant one of these things, and then in springtime, I'm going to make one of these things. No, you're not. This takes a certain skill and it takes a lineage of skill. You have to learn how to treat these leaves to produce these results. Yes.
Peter says, I find it both mouth-watering, but dry and with much astringency as if it had been aged in an oak barrel.
Oh, I love this comment. Mouth-watering and dry as if it had been aged in an oak barrel. Why do I like this comment? Because Aggie talked about the smoothness and juiciness, and Peter in some way is picking up on this because he says, wait a minute, stay present, because there's also a dryness to this in addition to the smoothness of it. Great catch.
Dylan says, I'm detecting notes of umami throughout.
I like this comment. I really like this comment. So Dylan talks about the fact, hey, folks, yeah, I'm attracted by sweetness and chocolate too, but don't forget there is that tea umami-ness in this. So he fills out an entire picture of this tea because there is umami. Is it the first thing you taste? No. But as you keep going down and you stay present, it's there. Yes.
Jeremy asks, is the bag dust equivalent to trichomes? I.e., should I rinse the bag for healthy amendment?
Okay, so Jeremy asked about the dust. Should she rinse it and then actually drink it? You could do that, but remember, we're talking about minuscule parts here. And for me, and remembering also that I'm very lazy, for me, I can't get around to doing that. And because I'm drinking so much tea, but you won't harm yourself at all by doing that.
Jeannie says, calming, warming in my chest.
Love this energetics comment. Calming, warming in the chest. Again, for all of those of you who are in a cold area right now, this is a wonderful tea to bring out warmth.
Rob says, there's a thickness to the tea water on top of the astringency, and then a sense of malt comes all the way through the stages of brewing. And by the way, no monkey is going to catch me unaware after drinking this tea.
Great comment, Rob. And I like the monkey part of it, but I really love the thickness part of it, because noting that there's a thickness about this tea gives all of you this sense of, hey, let me go back and detect that thickness. The Chinese would agree with you, Rob. When they drink this thing, they exactly describe this as having a density. You know how some teas that you drink, not from Sophie's, of course, but when you go to, wherever you go to, some teas you drink have just thinness. They don't have substance, or else they've had to add something else to put substance in. This is unadded. This is the thickness of the inherent tea itself. Love the fact you use that word, because again, exactly the Chinese would say that. Yes.
Jennifer shares, at the top of the cup, The astringency was off the charts, incredibly drying in my mouth. But as I drink into the cup, that effect is lessening.
This is an interesting comment. So Jennifer talks about the intensity of the astringency when she first started. And then as she drinks down the cup, how it's less intense. So let me make two comments about this. First off, do I really think the level of intensity has changed? I don't. What I do think, though, is more of your mouth gets involved. Parts of it, especially in the taste buds, that don't react to that sort of astringency and instead focus on flavor and take your attention away from astringency. Remembering flavor is a complicated thing, complicated sense. And we're set up as animals to detect things, first off, to prevent ourselves from being poisoned, and then second off, to bring enjoyment. So we're looking first off, oh, is this thing bitter, maybe poison? Or, hey, this is sweet, unlikely to be poison. And then you forget about the other things that are going on in your mouth. Not that they've stopped going on, you forget about it, you're taken away.
Jeremy says the tea is well named, and Aggie observes it's definitely warming for her as well, and such a lovely flavor. Enjoying the second cup, which is just as nice as the first. Let me also add, it's about 10:40. Jeremy adds, would love to know the production process and duration of the process. I don't know if you want to pick that up for next time.
Thank you for the reminder that I've carried on way too long. And secondly, yes, next week we'll talk about a production process because I'll link that to production process for Fujian teas. Thank you, Aggie, for the, you mentioned, what did Aggie mention? Because she mentioned something very important.
Mentioned though was definitely warming for her.
Oh, and the
but
second cup.
The second cup, just as good as the first.
Second cup just as good as the first. You'll find second cup brings great pleasure. Third cup brings great pleasure. This is a tea that keeps on giving and giving. And the first comment was from
Well, when Jeremy about just it was absolutely named Paen for Paen, as she said.
yeah. Thank you very much. Yes, that was the first word that came to mind when I drank this, and hence for those of you again who are new on the production, you may not be aware that I name most of these teas, but the tea names are related to either the feeling about the tea or some history about the tea. There's never a name that doesn't have a relationship to something important about the tea. All right. God, every week I get to spend time with tea gods. And it is such a pleasure to spend time with all of you because you pick up things that I don't even necessarily get right off the bat. And it's just fabulous. I salute all of you because you stay present and you don't let first impressions guide how you're going to treat the entirety. Great job. Your responsibility this week, of course, is to stay healthy. By the way, March 8th, we will be closed. So for those of you who are on the broadcast, I remind you, there are 3 phrases in the English language you never want to hear. Phrase 2 is the one that relates to you. Buy your tea early. You don't want a tea emergency while we're gone. We won't be back until April 12th. All right. See you next week. Take care now.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.